Assalamualaikum dear students, this is Naeem Haider and welcome back. In today's class, we are going to talk about the types of sentences structure-wise. In the previous lecture, we talked about the types of the sentences function-wise, and today we'll learn different types of sentences structure-wise. So let's get started. Before we talk about the different types of sentences, let's first understand what is a sentence. So a sentence is basically a set of words that is complete, typically containing a subject and predicate. So this is the first condition, this is the second condition, and conveying a statement, question, exclamation or command, that is the third statement, and consisting of a main clause and sometimes one or more subordinate clauses. So this is the fourth condition or the fourth requirement for the group of words, for the set of words to become a sentence. Let me repeat it again. We call a set of words a sentence when it is complete. Number one, it has a subject and a predicate. Number two, it conveys a statement, a question, an exclamation or a command. Number three, and it consists of a main clause. That is the fourth requirement. And the optional requirement is that in addition to the main clause, it can sometimes have one or more than one subordinate clauses as well. So let's get started. There are four types of sentences according to the number and kinds of the clauses they contain. Okay, so when we classify the sentences structure wise, we basically classify the sentences according to the number and the kinds of the clauses. I mean, how many clauses are there. It also gives us insight into the categorization of the sentences, and then what is the type of those clauses. What type of clauses are there, whether they are the main clauses or subordinate clauses. That basically tells us the type of the sentence. And according to that, there are four types: simple sentences, complex sentences, compound sentences, and compound complex sentences. So let's learn about these types in detail, and we'll look at each one of these more closely. So the first type is the simple sentence. A simple sentence has only one independent clause and no subordinate clause. So in a simple sentence, there is only one clause, and that clause is an independent clause. And in the simple sentence, there are no subordinate clauses. For example, the runner won the race easily. Now let's look at this sentence. This is one simple clause, and that is an independent clause. So what makes a clause an independent clause? When it has a subject and a verb or a predicate, that becomes a clause. So the runner is the subject, won is the verb, and the race is direct object here, and easily is adverb. The second type is the compound sentence. A compound sentence has two or more than two independent clauses and no subordinate clause. So in a compound sentence, there can be minimum two, and maximum it can be 3, 4, 5, as many as possible independent clauses. But you need to keep this in your mind that in a compound sentence, there are only independent clauses and no subordinate clause at all. Let's have a look at a sentence. The runner trained for many months, so he won the race easily. Now the runner trained for many months, that's the first independent clause, and he won the race easily, that is the second independent clause. Now in the first independent clause, the runner is the subject, trained is verb, many months, for many months, that is adverb of time. And in the second clause, he is subject, won is verb, the race is direct object, and easily is adverb of manner. The third type of sentence according to structure is the complex sentence. A complex sentence has one independent clause and one or more than one subordinate clauses. For example, the runner who had trained for many months won the race easily. Now the runner here is the subject. The runner won the race easily, that is the main clause, that is the independent clause. And who had trained for many months, who had trained for many months, that is the subordinate clause. Now in the main clause, the runner is the subject and won the race easily, won is the verb, the race is the direct object, and easily is the adverb. And in the subordinate clause, who, the relative pronoun who is the subject, had trained is the verb, for many months that is the adverb of time. Let's move towards the fourth and the last type of sentence according to the structure, and that is the compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence has two independent clauses and one or more than one subordinate clauses. Let's have a look at a sentence. The runner who had trained for many months won the race easily. Now, the runner won the race easily, that is the first main clause, but she did not attain a personal best. She did not attain a personal best. That is the second independent clause. Whereas who had trained for many months, that is the subordinate clause. Now in the first main clause, and the first main clause is the runner won the race easily. In that clause, the runner is the subject, won is the verb, the race is the direct object, easily is the adverb of manner. And in the second independent clause, she is the subject, did not attain is the verb, and a personal best is the direct object. Now, as far as the subordinate clause is concerned, who as a relative pronoun is the subject, had attained is the verb, for many months is adverb of time. So I hope the concept is clear now. Now it may be helpful to remember them in this way. I'm going to give you a chart, and this chart will basically help you out in order to remember the types of sentences according to the structure. Now in a simple sentence, we have one independent clause and there is no subordinate clause. In a compound sentence, there are two or more than two independent clauses and there is no subordinate clause. In the complex sentence, there is one independent clause and one or more than one subordinate clauses. In a compound complex sentence, there are two or more than two independent clauses and there is one or more than one subordinate clause. Now it's time to check your knowledge. You have to identify the sentence type in the following sentences. The first sentence is, she smiled sweetly and he grinned shyly. She smiled sweetly and he grinned shyly. Now that is basically a compound sentence. What type of sentence is this? This is a compound sentence. This is a compound sentence. Why? Because she smiled sweetly is the first main clause and he grinned shyly is the second main clause. Independent clause is also the main clause. Okay, so it has got two names. You can call it the independent clause or the main clause. Alright, so she smiled sweetly is the first main clause and he grinned shyly is the second main clause. And Mary and Tom agreed to meet after school. That's a simple sentence. Why? Because Mary and Tom agreed. Agreed on what? To meet after school. That it has only one main clause. Now let's look at this sentence. I had a poor background and the subject was quite difficult. However, the teacher explained the concepts very clearly. That is a compound sentence. Why? Because I had a poor background is the first main clause and is the coordinating conjunction. The subject was quite difficult is the second main clause, and the teacher explained the concept very clearly is the third main clause. Now I have some other sentences for you. Because the store was closed, we returned home. Now what type of sentence is this? This is basically a complex sentence. Why? Because the store was closed, that is a subordinate clause. We returned home, that is the main clause or the independent clause. The old prospector was discouraged. However, when I suggested giving up, he was indignant. Now that is a compound complex sentence. Why? Because the old prospector was discouraged. That is the first main clause. And he was indignant. That is the second main clause. So we got two main clauses. And when I suggested giving up. When I suggested giving up. That is the subordinate clause. So two main clauses and at least one subordinate clause. That basically makes it a compound complex sentence. Let's have a look at another sentence. Although my friends were lost for a while, they eventually found the restaurant that you recommended. Now that is a complex sentence. Why it is a complex sentence? Because they eventually found the restaurant is the main clause or the independent clause, and although my friends were lost for a while, that is the first subordinate clause, and that you recommended, that is the second subordinate clause. So two subordinate clauses and one main clause, that is basically a complex sentence. So today we talked about the types of sentences structure wise, and in the next topic we'll talk about the conditional sentences. If you have not watched the previous lectures, check the description, and there you will find the link of a playlist, and that playlist will take you towards the whole course where you can find all of the videos in a row in an order. All right, so stay connected, and if you have any questions, you can leave your questions in the comment box. I'll see you in the next class. Allah Hafiz.